cognizant of that, we would appreciate it, and give the attention to Phil from Topology and Keith. I'll thank them in advance for all the work that they've done for this town this week. It's been some great stuff, and we look forward to not only today, but the continuing efforts that will happen far past this afternoon's presentations. So, Keith.
Thank you, Mayor. So again, I'm Phil Abramson. I'm the planner for the town. I just want to thank you all for coming out on a Saturday to hear from us again, and really to thank you all for the week. You guys have been extraordinary. I do this in a lot of places. I've been doing this for a long time. The amount of input that Livingston has come forward with, and the amount of participation, I see some familiar faces now in the crowd. So this will be good. This project will be good because of the input that you've all given us. So I just also want to recognize some others on the project team. Mark Linser from Topology has been here throughout the week. Keith Covington, who's going to be speaking. Jessica Wilson, pour one out. She is back in Nashville right now. Erica is back there. And Ron Liddell, I'm not sure, and he's over here, our real estate and financial analyst. So thank you all to everybody. Everybody put their lives on hold, really, for a week to be here. So thank you all. Thank your families for all the commitment. So in this past week, there's been over 15 hours of direct engagement. Again, this is an extraordinary thing. Between all these different pinup sessions and including today. So it's been a great week. We've gotten a lot of work done. We're excited to share it with you. So I'm going to kind of go through a lot of this pretty quickly. There was a survey, almost 4,200 responses from this community. Again, this is extraordinary. We do this a lot. I put things out all the time into the public, and they do not get this kind of response. So good for you guys, good for this community, and again, this project will be better because of all of you and because of the input that you've provided. We also had some meetings and correspondence with Essex County, with the Board of Education. A lot of school comments and considerations came up during the week. We wanted to hear directly from them. And with PSE&G, since they have some pretty visible transmission lines right in front of this property, to kind of see what the rules were associated with that. So most of you, I think, were probably here on Monday, but for those who weren't, just to kind of give a recap, this is Livingston Mall from the sky. And it looks, again, like kind of a normal shopping mall, but when you get a little closer, to the details of it, you start to realize that there's issues here, and there's things that make this a very challenging site to redevelop. From a property and real estate perspective, like I call this the tangled knot, because you have Sears sitting on its own piece of property, you have Lord & Taylor sitting on a long-term land lease, you have Macy's sitting on a long-term land lease, and then you have the mall. And all of these have kind of easements and agreements with each other about what can and can't happen at the mall. So it was built as a unit, and it was like legally created as a unit. And to begin to take it apart is something that's going to be a real challenge. The other thing that you don't see from the sky is sort of the condition that the mall is in. I'll be generous and just say it's in rough shape. That there's a lot of vacant stores. I've never, if you haven't seen this, it's like you've never seen anything like it, really. Huge holes in the parking lot. The air conditioner was out last summer. The escalators are out. The elevators. So it is kind of in its last years, I would say. Some other things that were kind of drumbeats in the background. There was a affordable housing settlement agreement that was before all this started. That goes back 2 or 3 years, maybe more, which authorizes up to 376 residential units on this property as we sit here today, and that's really specific to the Sears site. Not to say that we won't be able to work with the owner of Sears and the owner of the mall to distribute those and maybe get a better result. But right now, that's a legal reality. Again, the mall, it's in rough shape, yes, but it's still a significant real estate asset. It continues to have value. That what we build here, what is built here, needs to create value and recoup the value. So it's not just because it's in bad shape; it's a free piece of property. And something I'm going to talk more about today, because I got a lot of questions about this throughout the week, is that this is a significant taxpayer. At one point, it was probably the biggest taxpayer in this township. I don't know if it still is or not, but it certainly doesn't pay the amount of taxes that it used to. And that, tax revenue is important to communities. It's important to all of you taxpayers, that we have a balanced diet when it comes to fiscal responsibility. So just to set some expectations for today, what you will see, neighborhood layout, sort of the bones of a plan, the streets, the open spaces, the land uses, meaning where are we recommending retail, where are we recommending residential, what types of residential, what building types. And all of this really is intended to, it was a week of intense focused work intended to create some preliminary direction. Rather than let this go on for months and months, it was to get everybody together, get everybody talking, get everybody working, and really focus to get a preliminary guide, all subject to evolution, all subject to continued engagement, continued conversation, but we have a good starting point now, and we have a much better understanding of what you want. And how you feel about this. Things you're not going to see today, like a detailed phasing plan. I was asked that question. You're not going to see detailed civil engineering, drainage, traffic engineering. We're not going to get deeply into the financial model or the fiscal, the tax implications. So these things will be addressed. They're all important. It's just we had to kind of pick our battles and start at the beginning. So this is kind of our standard, like, phased planning process. We are basically here. We're basically halfway through. So we have done a lot of work in a pretty short amount of time, but there's still a lot left to do, a lot of things that are going to be details, a lot of things that are kind of in the weeds. So again, what you have today, if there's certain questions, this is a product of where we are in a pretty significant and important process. Some of the things that we've heard was to create, and I really give you a lot of credit. The amount of optimism I heard on Monday, the amount of optimism and vision that I heard throughout the week inspired me. And I think it was, you see a site like this and you get, like, kind of tired of looking at it, and it's like this exhausting thing to have to think about. But when we asked you to come out and talk about it, everybody had their imagination, and everybody had vision, and everybody kind of is open to something new happening here. So that was great to hear. And a lot of the things were, looking at Livingston as a place where there's a big continuum of ages, and that all the ages like to interact with each other, that we want to attract and not just necessarily serve this community, but this sits in a really interesting location, right? On the southwest side of the community. So we have Florham Park, we have Chatham, we have Milburn, we have other communities that use South Orange Avenue, that use Eisenhower Parkway. And how does this fit into a larger regional picture? And how does it fit into Livingston? And how do you provide things for this community? A range of shops, not just big box, and including small shops. Diversity of housing options from different ages, from different sizes, from different ownership things. And activity and amenity was maybe one of the biggest themes we heard, that people want stuff to do, fun stuff to do, indoors and outdoors. Open spaces, you're going to hear a lot more about this from Keith, and just convenience, comfort, walkable, bikeable, transit accessible, and something that integrates in a sensitive way in a respectful way with the surrounding neighborhood. We also heard a lot of people brought like their pictures of favorite places. And like, so these are some that we had in our notes. Meisner Park, Florida was one of the big ones that we kept hearing again. Somebody brought up Bonn, Germany, which is a place that is very thoughtful about parking and shuttle busing and things to get people around. Portland, Oregon, which is a real leader in sustainability and how to deal with stormwater. So I just wanted to kind of share what we heard and maybe conversations that not everybody was there. What are some of the concerns that we heard? Traffic, cut-through traffic, impacts to Walnut, impacts to the neighborhoods off Walnut, scale and massing, that, you know, a lot of people were very specific about the maximum height of buildings that they were willing to tolerate. Again, impacts on neighbors. I'm going to get into property values, Avi, don't worry. And then sustainability about stormwater management, ecosystems, renewable energy. Some other things we heard, and we learned about this during this process, and I think a lot of residents learned about this during this process, was that there's a roundabout going in at Walnut and Hobart Gap, West Hobart Gap. So I wanted to show you this, make sure you were all aware that this is happening. I didn't create this. This is an Essex County project, but it's something that's happening nearby that we had to think about, and potentially as an opportunity. Another thing that people were talking about was flooding. Flooding in this area. So we took a look at the flood map. What we call the teardrop, everybody's familiar with that term generally? So the teardrop, there's a stream that used to run through here that was put into a pipe or a culvert. So it runs right underneath this site. There is some homes on Walnut and Stratford and a few of these other streets here that are within the flood hazard area. But most of this site sits higher and is dry from a flood hazard perspective. Property values. So I'm going to say two things about property values because this question did come up. There's something called the dead mall syndrome I learned this week in my research. And what happens is these malls start to lose tenants, and it's very hard to re-tenant them, to get more in. Property values go down, the taxes start to go down, and it becomes this sort of downward cycle. This is documented. This is national, if not an international problem, because of the nature of malls being this one single central command sort of property type. The research has shown, I looked at a few journal articles, 3 to 7% decline in property values within a quarter mile of significant retail vacancy. So the National Association of Realtors have had things to say about this. And the things that kind of create this is the visual impact, the loss of access to what was a retail amenity. Sometimes security concerns can come out of a vacant space like this, and what they call economic signaling. A signal to the market, a psychological impact, that when a place is vacant, it suggests it's not valuable. So then the things around it lose psychological value. So this is why you should do something, and this is why the mall, as it sits today and as it will sit over the next several years, will not be a good thing for property values in the surrounding neighborhood. So there's another term that I learned this week called demalling. When you demall a property, which is kind of what we're talking about here, that properties have seen significant value increases when you have mixed-use pedestrian redevelopment, that the quality matters, the quality of open spaces, the quality of the streets, that the better the design, the more positive the impacts, the research is showing, that this does spill over to adjacent homes and adjacent properties. And that I think one of the more interesting things that I read was, and it was kind of like apropos to this week, is that the projects that had more community input and more community engagement before they were developed tend to create higher property value impacts. It's like, isn't that cool, right? So we're doing something good here. And that's what I meant when I said that this will be better, this project will be better because of all the time that you have spent with us this past week. So what about property taxes? In 2010, and I'm almost done, Keith, I promise. In 2010, the mall generated about $5.2 million in tax revenue. In 2024, the last year, 1.46. It's a big drop. It's a big drop. When the revenues were at their high, which was like around 2011, it represented almost 3%. 2.8% of all the taxes paid in this community came from the mall. Now it's less than 1%. It's 0.7%. The average annual loss in tax revenue since that high is $2.85 million. And that it's a source of significant tax appeals. So these are the numbers we have today. There's a process by which landlords can take the municipality to court and say, no, you've assessed my property for too much. It's not as valuable as your tax assessor said. I'm paying too much in taxes. I want to get my tax bill lowered. That has happened here, and that probably will continue to happen here without some action, especially if it closes, right? Okay, so now I'm going to hand it over to Keith. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Can everyone hear me okay? I just want to echo what Phil said about this process this week and everyone coming out. This has been fantastic. It's always better for us as planners to have community engagement at a high level. And as you look at those stats, I also do this across the country, and you should pat yourselves on the back. Steady stream all week long of people, so I was really encouraged by that. Okay, so this is I'm going to start with some preliminary insights, and then we'll move into some of the concepts, and we'll talk through this. And I will ask, since we're trying to be sensitive to everyone's time, someone give me a signal if I start to go a little long, because there's a lot of things to talk about. Okay, so just in terms of defining what we're talking about again, here's South Orange. We refer to the area that Phil was just talking about that has some flood hazard area as the teardrop. Obviously, Walnut Street against the Coventry section. This red line right here represents the Sears site that's part of the redevelopment agreement, and then the transmission line right of way here. Here's Eisenhower on this side, and then there is this county quote-unquote park. It's unimproved right now, but it's certainly meant to be preserved, and then the roundabout there. So just to get framework. Some of the site features that we considered, you saw, if you were there Monday night, you probably saw this. Obviously, you've got this mature buffer, primarily along Walnut, and then somewhat up South Orange. We have these major streets to contend with, Eisenhower and South Orange, Walnut, which is actually considered a minor arterial, and then you've got Hobart Gap over here. So that's something that creates both constraints and opportunities for us. We've got multiple access points all the way around the property, 2 on Walnut, 2 on Eisenhower, 1 off of South Orange. We've got the transmission line that we have to acknowledge and be very mindful of. And then we also have a topographic issue. As most of you know, the mall is really 2 stories on the Eisenhower side, and on the Walnut side, it actually is just you're entering in the 2nd story. So topography is something that we need to consider. Nice gentle slope in here, so that's good. So preliminary insights, just lay out, and I'll try not to read all of this, but I may read some of it just because we were doing this up until about 15, 20 minutes ago, so I may not remember everything. But first and foremost, the plan needs to be flexible to meet market demands and an evolving understanding of what the needs are for the township. The way that you do that is to create a network of streets and blocks, but it's not just about roads and blocks, it's about making sure that those streets are pedestrian friendly and human scaled. Another thing is to not let parking drive the design. If you look at the current mall, there's a perfect example of how parking drives the design. I understand that's the model of a mall, but this is something where we talked a lot about Monday night about creating a sense of place. Being a good neighbor, particularly against Walnut Street. We've got an established residential neighborhood. We want to maintain that landscape buffer, discourage through traffic, and really think about the orientation and transition of development intensity as it moves towards that portion of the site on the east side. There's something else that's very different about the current model and what we're talking about here and what we heard from you is the idea of a mixture of uses in this area, not just one large retail site with multiple tenants, but something that actually creates a synergy between complementary uses. A variety of public spaces and green space to meet a variety of needs. Also, creative use of the topography to use that in terms of dealing with the scale of development as well as helping us with parking and hiding it and so forth. And then the teardrop. This was another big thing. Because of the flood hazard, because it's the low point of the site, we see it as an opportunity to preserve much of that and kind of return it to green where it's all paved right now. And then, of course, there is the opportunity toward the township's fourth round of affordable housing, but that is just something to we can talk about that during the Q&A and so forth. But this is just an idea of what is the flexibility of this site and what could actually happen here. So real quickly, if you were here Tuesday night, we kind of took and consolidated what we heard from the visioning session on Monday, and we kind of created a framework with the big ideas, the big concepts. That's why it looks so diagrammatic. You could start to see the idea of having public spaces throughout the site, recognizing constraints like the big roads and the transmission lines and so forth, and the idea of a network of streets and blocks. Then on, was it Wednesday night? It's all running together now. On Wednesday night, our design team, our designers were able to, including myself, were able to kind of start actually putting buildings and streets and spaces on there to get a feel for what is possible in the site. And that, we had a couple of concepts there. We had great conversation, reaction, and discussion with those people that came out, both throughout the week after these were done, but also Wednesday night when we did that pin-up review. And this is what kind of got us to the point of actually getting a sort of a general program that we could do a conceptual illustrative plan, but again, with that knowledge in mind that we want to maintain flexibility. We don't want any one thing to be a linchpin to the plan. So now I'm going to get into some of the things that you haven't seen yet. See, these are the more refined versions. I wanted to include this. I had a great conversation with Judith about naming or nomenclature. This drawing right here illustrates something that I just want to share with you really briefly. We've referred to this as a charrette. I think that, and we do this all over the place, and the thing is that we talk about this being something like an intense brainstorming session over a short period of time. That word charrette has been used ever since the 70s, and it got a resurgence in planning in the late 80s and early 90s and carried through today. But it comes from a famous French architecture school where at the end of the semester, when the students were finishing up their drawings to have them reviewed by their professors, the cart or charrette would come through the studios and collect the drawings. And the legend goes that as the cart was going towards the jury room, that the students were like walking with the cart and still drawing on their drawings. I can literally say that happened today, okay? I mean, we have been working really hard, some pretty late nights, and what you're going to see is a work in progress. I just want to reiterate what Phil said, that this is really about an evolving design that started from that visioning session and will continue to be refined as we get towards the end of this process. So this is the illustrative master plan. I want to hit on some of the things, get you oriented, and hit some of the big ideas, and then we'll zoom in on a few areas and get a little bit more context. So here's Eisenhower, here's South Orange, here's Walnut. Some of the big ideas here, and I mentioned some of them previously, but now within the context of this. First thing is the idea that this site could contain a mixture of complementary uses, number one. Number two is the idea that the circulation within the site should be in the form of streets that are walkable, pedestrian-friendly, tree-lined, have streetscaping, places that would encourage people to use that space and to make and to go out to dinner, work, or live all in this place and feel comfortable walking around, as well as being a destination for those that might be driving or riding transit. So the idea is to accommodate all kinds of modes of transportation, if you will. And you do that by creating a network of streets, and that's what you see here. The other big idea that I wanted to mention is the idea that and you can't really see it in this plan, but the idea that the scale of development transitions towards the buffer and towards the Coventry neighborhood, and we'll get into that. Another thing you will see here is a really early idea, since the new roundabout is going, the possibility of actually having that come into our site that way, which would allow us to kind of eliminate this odd access point that's across from Iroquois. The only reason why it's still showing up right there is because there are a lot of things that have to happen. That is a county property, as we mentioned before, and it's a preserve, and so there's a lot of things that would have to happen, but we see this as a real opportunity to help kind of distribute traffic and bring traffic to the site. The other thing that I want to mention is we heard a lot about creating a heart, creating a destination, creating a central public space, and that's what we have here. So you kind of have a main road that comes off of South Orange, rises gently up the slope to a larger public gathering space, and then it connects out to the current other access point off of Eisenhower. And then you have a this would be a north-south. It looks east-west on here, paper-wise. But north-south, the idea of extending that green in a median-type format all the way through the site so that we have more opportunity for streetscaping and landscaping and things like that and spaces. And then you will see in small corners and spaces surrounded by buildings the idea of incorporating smaller public spaces that can serve both residents and so forth. And so those are some of the key elements there. Now, we have an aerial view. Remember I said that this is a charrette, and we're on the cart. Our illustrator, J.J. Sonetta, was able to get a good start on an aerial rendering here. This is the view that he started with, and we have a little 30-second video that kind of shows you his process, and then I'll show you where we're at on that. So go for it. So this is real quick. You can sort of see how he starts. He takes our concept plan. He lays it over the site. We pick the views, and then he's able to really start to, you start to see buildings and streets and street trees and spaces start to form. It's only 30 seconds, but I think it's a really cool thing that he does with all of his illustrations. So You can start to see this is that main spine right there. There's our central public space, and that's that. Now, if I go to this is the work in progress. It's not fully rendered and colored yet. It will be in the next couple of days, but this gives you an idea, just an aerial view of what we're talking about. And so what I wanted to focus on, if Eisenhower is out here, okay, this transition of development and intensity and uses around the core, I mean, more larger retail out here. I'll talk about that in a second. A true mixed-use Main Street surrounding this public space, the median here that connects all the way down there, and this could be actually mixed-use, all this arrangement, just depending on the market. That's the flexibility. The transition in scale down to 2- and 3-story residential only on this edge. The idea, you can see the teardrop back here, the idea of maintaining that or returning it to green and possibly a water feature there, and then the idea of maintaining that buffer. So maybe a little hard to see yet, but when it's all finished, I think it will. I think you'll get a good idea of kind of the overall concept. So if I were to zoom in on Eisenhower, this area, so there's Eisenhower right here. Here's the main entrance today, the secondary entrance today, and what happens here. So one thing is, you know, there's all of this is pretty much paved right now underneath the transmission lines. We would love to see that reduced in the future, or maybe even eventually go away and return that to green. Not necessarily a park per se, but the idea of having a green. And one thing that I failed to mention, but I'll show it on the back end, is another key thing was the idea. We heard a lot, the idea of having a walking trail all along the perimeter of this site that is also attached to the street network, so people can walk, go into town center, go back out, and there are nice moments all the way through that. But if you imagine on the Eisenhower side having a separated multipurpose trail, maybe limited parking, you know, you might have to keep some of it if you have a larger box. This is illustrating if a grocery store, because we heard a lot about that, if a new grocery store were to come in, this sort of represents the format of that, and so they would need a larger field of parking. But what we're doing here in this area is taking advantage of the lower side and being able to park underneath some of this area where the mall is now, and that helps to eliminate the amount of surface parking that we see. So we can reduce it in certain areas. We may be able to reduce it even more. But the idea is to really do that. And then for this, instead of this just being a driveway, it actually needs to function like a street. It's still going to move cars, but it needs to be pleasant for pedestrians, bicyclists, and so forth. So you will see that as the first street that you cross. And then along this edge right here is where we think that if you have more single tenant, larger box retail like the grocery, let's say the Barnes & Noble, which I think is probably the most viable thing right now in the mall. If it were to relocate, Barnes & Nobles go into a lot of different mixed-use neighborhoods across the country, so they could be incorporated in this, but those kind of one-off uses would probably be there because they have a higher demand for visibility and parking. And then once you get into this area, is when you're going to get into a different kind of focus. Now, this is some Preston imagery. So this is what we see, not from the site today. This is the next street up. I can't remember. It's just north of there. But I was like, wow, you know, I mean, these transmission lines are kind of crazy, but at least you don't see paving underneath it. So even if it could go back to some green or all green or something like that would be good. And here's just a precedent example of a trail that actually goes right along a transmission line. I can't remember exactly where this is, but we wanted to show that this is not a foreign concept, the idea of having a multi-purpose trail. And I should add that if you have that trail, it doesn't necessarily have to be limited to the site. It could be part of a larger network that connects different parts of the township. So that's really important. The other thing, this is just some examples of big box. This is the Barnes & Noble in Bethesda, Maryland, that is right within a redeveloped more urban and walkable mixed-use area. This is actually from Nashville, where I'm from, and this is a public supermarket that is right in line with a completely mixed-use development. So you can incorporate those bigger boxes, but they still have a larger footprint and so forth. They don't have the fine-grained scale that we think of when we think about the other things that you talked about in terms of boutique shops and restaurants and sidewalk dining and things like that. That's going to happen more in the center. So this is our central open space here. We'll talk about that separately. This is that sort of main street. So this right here is where we really want to emphasize retail and active uses on the ground floor. Could be entertainment, could be a number of uses. All of these buildings are very flexible in their footprint to allow that. But the idea of having a central gathering space, maybe it has a stage, maybe it has, interactive features here, but this should be a vibrant, active space. And then as you move north, we sort of transition perhaps to a little bit more residential, but the reality is that with the flexibility of this plan, we could have, and if the demand were there, we could have more retail uses and so forth on the ground floor that really makes this an elongated street, a la like Meisner Park, if for those of you who know that, and many other countless mixed-use centers that have been developed. So again, there's a lot of flexibility here, but the idea was to continue that in a median form so that, again, like I said, we get more landscaping and streetscaping, and this becomes a really desirable place to be. As you transition back here, of course, this is the Sears site, so we're showing kind of a combination of maybe stacked flats where it's more intense towards the west. I'm still getting my directions out. Towards Eisenhower, I'll just put it that way, and then transitioning into a lower scale, 2 to 3 story townhouses and things like that as we get down to the scale of that. Another thing you'll notice here is we have kind of utilized the existing road that goes all the way along the mall, but because we have a network of streets that connect us throughout the site, we can actually take sections of that road, close it off, and it can be all formal green space or locations for playgrounds. You see the same thing, small spaces there. These units front a fairly large space there. And then, of course, even in some of the larger, more flat-type buildings, there could be internal courtyards and so forth to not only serve the residents, but potentially serve other folks too. So there's just these little moments throughout the plan where we can take advantage of getting a little bit of green and some activity. So this is some precedent imagery for what we're calling the center. This is what I'm talking about or referring to when it comes to having, wide sidewalks, buildings that front the street, not parking, street trees, and so forth, so it's an inviting place. Streetscape becomes really important in the center. This is kind of an example of a median treatment there, although I'm not saying that that's exactly what would happen here. It's just a notion. The idea that if you have these stacked flat units that instead of them being surrounded by parking, that you either tuck the parking underneath or that you hide it behind the building and the buildings themselves actually frame the street. This is a very critical, important step in this overall phase because this is very different. This is like kind of almost turning the mall inside out, but with a mixture of uses. The space between the buildings in the street becomes public space, just like our larger green spaces, and that's really important. And then, of course, architecture as part of the plan as this process moves forward. There can be design standards incorporated into the zoning for the site that would help to define the architecture and make sure that what is built is, doesn't, that it actually helps in that idea of framing the space and having a good scale and so forth for development. So that's just one example. This main public space, this right here is in Bayshore in Wisconsin. This is generally about the same size as the space that we show in the concept plan. So you can see that you can accommodate a lot in there. They have a stage, they have a lot of landscaping, they do outdoor festivals. The other thing that's great about the plan is that because of that network of streets and multiple ways for cars to get around, there are opportunities to close off portions of that to have more street festivals and things like that. That is a very important key concept in a lot of downtowns, in a lot of town center developments, even neighborhood centers, the idea of being able to do that. And sorry, did someone say? Okay, all right, I got to keep going. So that's really, really important to think about how we activate that space. This is the hub in 30A. This is Monmouth in Carmel, Indiana. This is Storrs Center in Connecticut. Another thing, too, about flexibility, a lot of different uses can happen in this kind of core of this town center. You could have spaces that have, active different types of recreation associated with it. You could have indoor entertainment. This is actually a bowling, restaurant, performance venue in Chattanooga. Co-working spaces, one-off restaurants. This is a food hall called Assembly Food Hall in Nashville, Tennessee that's very popular. And even in my own town of Franklin, Tennessee, right on its main street, they converted the old movie theater into a performance space. They lease it out for private events. They have theater there and everything like that. So all of these things don't have to be, these things that we heard about all week, don't have to be single use things throughout the development. They can be incorporated into the scheme. Eastern edge, so Walnut here, we want to maintain this buffer. The residential, as I've talked about, gets to a smaller scale. You have potential for units fronting open space as well as streets, but not parking. Other types of spaces can be programmed in a number of ways, but that is kind of one of the ways that you can really increase the variety of building types and so forth in that area. Southern edge, this is the edge where the teardrop is and the entry off of South Orange. You can see that we have some bigger box here. We looked at some different programmatic elements just to see how they would fit. The idea of a medical wellness facility there, the idea of maybe there's an indoor recreational complex that's associated here, the idea of a hotel. Those are things that can definitely fit within the program. Here's even another option where the medical wellness kind of anchors the corner here because it's got a slightly bigger footprint, and maybe the hotel actually is on the other side of the drive and actually takes advantage of the teardrop itself. And the teardrop, we really think, needs to be part of the trail system, some sort of pond that is well designed, isn't just a retention pond, but something that looks like it incorporates stormwater management and other issues. So here's some imagery here. This is a sports complex in Owensboro that's under construction. This is there are tons of options for hotels and that have incorporated into centers like this. This is just one example. Here's an example of a medical wellness piece. Here's some examples of what the teardrop could be: passive open space, a trail along the water, and you could even have maybe a building with a restaurant in it, or just a dock that has paddle boats or things like that. It's not a huge lake by any means. It's not like the reservoir in West Orange that we heard about, but it is still an an opportunity to incorporate and not just have that be leftover space, but to have it be usable space for the community. So with that is the overall, and I know you'll probably have lots of questions, but I've been told to wrap up.
All right, thank you all. We'll just go to, actually, let me just go back to the prior slide just to kind of give a little bit of closure, anticipating some questions. Oh, it's not in there. It's in that one. Whoever's controlling the key. No, Mark, could you go back one slide? Yeah, here. Nope. Keep going. No, the other way. Yeah, I wanted to just talk a little bit about some next steps, which I'm sure is a question out there. Well, I kind of know what it says since I wrote it. So basically, you know, step one is if you want to go like to the last slide right before the end. We have a lot more work to do, right? We have to do more work on engineering. There it is. See, engineering. That was pretty good. Engineering, environmental work, just to kind of really begin to put the. We're good, Mark. You could leave it alone. The more technical aspects, grading, drainage, all that. We have a lot of work to do with Ron on financial underwriting, which is going to kind of begin to drive a little bit about how much of what needs to happen here. And what I'm calling a community facilities assessment. We had one conversation with the Board of Education. That dialogue needs to continue. And before we kind of land on any one final layout. We need to have more conversations with the town council. They've been kind of participants in this process, and now as we begin to make our insights and come to our conclusions, there's legal issues here. We need to engage with the property owners at this point to kind of see what's possible, get direction from your elected officials. And I think at this point, and given where we are, I can't say that we'll be back here in a month. But as there's more information available and useful, like material information available, we will continue to keep the public available. Kind of continue in the track that we have, and yeah. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Mark is here with a microphone. So I think we have like 15, 20 minutes, if that's okay, Mark, if you want to hand it off.
Testing. Okay. There you go.
Okay. I just want to say these are spectacular plans.
Okay.
I mean, it's like totally impressive and completely could be transforming what Livingston is. I mean, I love Livingston. To me, Livingston's like paradise, right? I'm sure everybody agrees here. It's really like paradise. We live in a beautiful, beautiful, I mean, this whole area. Okay, all right. I understand. Okay. The thing is this, it's a matter of, okay. We live in a beautiful area. We have South Mountain Reservation right here. Everyone's been to Turtleback. Everyone knows about the Orange Reservoir, I hope. Everyone's gone down there, walks around the reservoir. It's a wonderful, this area is like, I can't say enough about it. Anyway, I'm from Brooklyn originally. Okay, so I really appreciate the greenery, and I appreciate the nature out here. It's spectacular. So what I just want to say is, myself, I've been planting native plants for about 8 years, native shrubbery, and it's pretty much become a very well-known topic that we need to pay attention to nature, restore nature. We need to support our bird population, our butterfly population. So all I'm saying, if we go to Orange Reservoir, for instance, they did fantastic restoration around the reservoir, right? They planted native trees, native shrubs, native plants. This supports the birds, the insect population, which is critical given the nature of the condition of the environment, what's going on with warming, all these things. Okay, we need this desperately. So I'm hoping that this is beautiful, incredible plan with the teardrop. It's amazing. So, I mean, if you're going to, it'd be wonderful you consult with Essex County, what they did around Turtleback with the restoration there, and do the same thing with the teardrop at least. And these shrubs, these trees that are planted there, it's very important we don't have invasive trees
Sir,
planted.
I hate to cut you off.
Okay.
I love your positivity. I love what you're saying, and I'm taking from it is that like the restorative aspect, sustainability, nature. I just want to give everybody else a chance.
I understand. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate your comments.
Yes,
Thank you.
Livingston's great.
Yeah, maybe some questions only if there are questions.
Thank you. Are we able to go back to the slide called the Eastern Edge?
Yeah. Was that?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Oop.
wait.
Wait, go, yes.
There you go.
Okay. I'm a resident of the Coventry area, and I know it's been expressed many times before about closing off the entrances on Walnut Street to the mall area. Looking at this, I see 4 entrances. It looks like 2 of them might be pedestrian.
Pedestrian only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pedestrian entrances only bring up another question for me. People will then park on Crichton and Eaton, and they will park on Winston, and they will walk through on the pedestrian entrance into the mall area. That will create security issues for me in the Coventry area, and I think for anyone else who might be here from the Coventry area. It will also create parking issues in the Coventry area. We have no sidewalks in Coventry whatsoever. So to have cars be parked there while people enter the mall through a pedestrian entrance could be a real potential problem. And I would like you to consider that very seriously, because security will be an issue. We already have a tremendous security issue in Coventry already.
We've heard that, yeah. And if I could just interrupt you for 1 second, I think the one thing that we should commit, kind of commit to as a community is that as these plans get developed, that we engage directly with Coventry,
That would be that would be a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And now if you could go to the southern edge slide, there was, thank you, the suggestion of a hotel to the right of the teardrop.
That's the other one.
Yeah.
That's the other, or there's the other
No, that one's
version.
good.
Okay.
That one's good.
Okay, go ahead.
Just to let you know that there was litigation from the Coventry area about not putting a hotel in that area. My understanding now is that that litigation has, I'm not a legal person, gone away, whatever has happened to it, but that specific area, and it was going to be in the teardrop area, has been litigated by the Coventry area because we did not want a hotel, especially if you have an entrance coming right down that street. People will be coming through there to head to the hotel at all hours and cutting through Coventry, disturbing our residential area with cars late at night, deliveries for a hotel, et cetera. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that comment. One thing that should be noted and reiterated here is, yes, we did show a hotel in here primarily because we know that this property is zoned for that, and we did hear the story of how there was going to be a hotel and then it didn't happen. But here's the important thing. If a hotel is viable here from a market standpoint, that hotel could be any number of locations here. The flexibility here is that there could be a hotel on the corner overlooking the green. So I would encourage you to not, with some exceptions perhaps, depending on the roadways and so forth around the edges of the site, and some of the things we've talked about transitioning scale, I would keep in mind that there's a lot of flexibility for how the eventual program could actually be incorporated into the site.
Just ask that you not only focus on the traffic on Walnut and its impact on Coventry, but security for Coventry as well.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. One second, somebody back there.
Hello, my name is Catherine Frykowska. I'm from APL Design Group here from Florham Park. My question is, as an architect, do you have already architects involved in the project to tackle the...
I'll repeat it. I'm hearing you. I'll repeat your question.
Okay, so I'm an architect working here in Florham Park from APL Design Group, and I'm just curious if you have already architects involved in that project and working on the architectural scale.
So no,
respond.
not only is there no architect, for most of the site there's no developer either. So no, not, very premature. Keith is the only actual designer that has done what you've seen.
And this is just high-level visioning. High-level visioning. All of that would come after this process. This is to kind of get the township's vision on paper.
Yep. Mark's on with the microphone.
My question is about the affordable housing.
Yes.
Is there a specific form the housing has to take?
It's a good question. So there is, we'll get to you, sir. So there's in the settlement agreement that was executed, there's an upper limit on how many can be townhomes. I think it's 81. 81 of the 376 may be townhomes under the agreement that exists. In terms of if there's more housing or more affordable housing on the site, it wouldn't, there wouldn't be a restriction or a,
Can they go into mixed-use buildings?
yes.
So there's no requirement that it be a particular structure?
No, the only
And they
real,
could be spread throughout the,
yes. There are a lot of requirements on affordable housing. The only one, the closest one to what, that relates to what you're asking about is about how big the unit, like how many bedrooms, how many 3 bedrooms, how many 2 bedrooms, that there's certain restrictions on that. Who's next, Mark? Hi.
Hi. I'm going to say I have several questions, but I did not hear some of the other neighbors. I think this location has some pretty serious, not large neighbors to the north and then to the west. What's their take on this project? That's the first question. Second, the traffic on Eisenhower in this area, it almost appears like it's a highway. Are there plans to reduce the scale of that road or roadway to make things a little more residential, quote unquote? And
I could probably do 2 at a time, okay. Just because of my memory. But number one, we have not engaged. So I think some of the neighbors you're talking about, like Newark Academy, Kushner Academy, Barnabas, RWA Barnabas, we have not had direct conversations with them at this point. They haven't come, forward. But I think that as part of this process, we would, particularly with Barnabas, given like we're right across the street from them, maybe there's some synergy there that could be achieved. The roadway question is an interesting one. I think what's really unique about this site, it's surrounded by roads on a road on 3 sides. They all happen to be county roads. I look at a lot of property in New Jersey. I don't know that I could find another site that has county roads on all sides. So number one, whatever happens to any of the roadways here is under the jurisdiction of Essex County. Number two, we need to make some traffic engineering conclusions about what ultimately happens and what the ultimate development program here. This site was built and the roads around it were built to accommodate almost 1 million square feet of retail. There's going to be a definite change. I understand your question. I think it's a good one. We had talked about like looking at like bike lanes and more like other kind of amenity type roadway along Eisenhower there. So it's very early on in that process, but I appreciate the consideration. Yeah. Do you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
Difference between Livingston and some other towns that nearby are Livingston doesn't have a main road to attract commerce,
Right.
Commerce along with pedestrian people, just making things lively. I'm not sure if the development of this project at this time has taken that into consideration, but you don't want to create an island where people, and I've heard already some country.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, let me talk about like the larger town planning issue, and like we could probably talk for another week about kind of what you're getting at here about Livingston Avenue, Mount Pleasant Avenue. I don't think this is an either-or type of situation. That we have an opportunity here. We have a site here. It's a site that will need to be redeveloped. I think that that's at a pretty high level of certainty. So what do you do with it? And so I think because we've had challenges in other parts of town creating the vibrancy, the walkability, doesn't mean we shouldn't do it here, in my opinion, as a planner. So, but I do think that what you're getting at's worth other conversation and how we can maybe achieve that by retrofitting. It's going to be a longer process, but one that this community should pay attention to. Thank you. Mark?
Hey, sorry, so I have one comment and one question on what you just said. this is not really, walkable for Livingston, right? Because it's not like Summit, downtown where you can walk to this place. You almost have to drive unless you stay in Coventry. So yes, you're trying to create something that's, walkable, and this looks like a great plan, but you need to drive there and then walk around. So I think that's something to consider. My question really was, have you guys had a chance to scrub, survey results, and how do those look from what the 4,000 people who have not been able to come here, how have they opined on this? Because you had a section on what do we want here versus what do we want to avoid here.
Right.
Are there some flags that you guys are seeing on the survey results?
So you're asking about the things you want to avoid. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's. I've been a planner for 15 years. I've worked in many municipalities. I have these types of conversations around new development a lot. The types of things I've heard, I would say 80% are the types of things that accompany any concern around new development, especially of this scale and this size. Traffic, visual impact, character, things of that nature. I would say the most unique things are the things that the woman from Coventry was talking about. Security, that this has been a security threat to that neighborhood over years. The traffic on Walnut and the access on Walnut. These are maybe the most unique things, and it makes sense because those are the closest residents to this, and those are the people that are going to be most impacted by it. But most of the other things, I would say were, the types of general concerns and things that we're going to need to be careful about.
And Phil, just to tack on a little bit to that, part of why we closed the survey on the 14th ahead of the shred is that we had time to sit back and analyze it. We're still very much in the process of doing all of that. But as of yesterday, between the maps outside from day one and the preliminary survey results, I was going through doing all the numerical quantitative summation compilation of things, and some of those concerns and opportunities that you saw on those slides are directly informed by both the survey and in-person input that we received. It's still the preliminary process. We'll follow up with more nuanced and thorough updates on that. But yes.
And to Mark's point, he did over the past couple of days, he sat with the maps and with a spreadsheet counting how many maps had this and how many people so I think for a matter of transparency, as we come back to you and have more time to doing things like finish coloring the drawings, to really quantitatively share, to get at your question. I think there's a couple more here.
My question is this. First of all, I will tell you that I'm a commercial real estate broker for 45 years, and I work in this area. And I could probably help you, and I'd be happy.
We should have interviewed you. I wish we did.
Okay. But I want to know who is in charge of the acquisitions and the finance of this project.
Right.
The plan is great, but when it comes to finances, that's where I would come in to help you.
Right. So this is a really interesting question. And one that it could go a number of ways. But at the end of the day, there will most likely be a single developer or two developers that do this project, and that we would need to work with them to determine what's feasible, where the market is. We did some, I would say, informal market reconnaissance. We had conversations with different tenants, with different commercial brokers, with different developers about per square foot rents, about costs. So a lot of the things that you saw here, that you didn't just see all apartments, right? That we had some confidence around some of the things on the commercial side in particular, because we know that that's the most sensitive and the hardest to rent right now, is going to be that. So we didn't want to set expectations here about things that were unreasonable. So we did. And we need to keep doing that, right? We need to keep engaging with the market, and ultimately the best determiner of the market is going to be that developer investor. But we're not going to necessarily trust everything they say at face value, because they have their interests. The community has their own interests. So we need to, trust but verify, and advocate for the types of things that the public has asked for. Thank you.
Phil, just to add one quick thing on that too, we got a lot of questions about process and timelines throughout this week. And as we saw on the last slide, we're very early on in this. We haven't even gotten to financial analysis and underwriting. So we have a long time to go, a lot of things and steps ahead of this. We'll probably put together some kind of explainer
or something, yeah.
Right. But to this point, we're literally at the first vision step. So we have a long road ahead of us.
So I think we'll take like 2 or 3 more questions. I'm gonna leave some business cards behind, and if there's, I don't want anybody to feel shut out. Sir.
Thanks. So you just said actually that the financial analysis is not yet complete, but my question was exactly about that. We're going to lose a bunch of tax revenue when the mall's gone. Do you have any alternate plans besides this, if this does not materialize exactly the way you're looking for, to get that revenue back? Because I'm pretty sure none of us wants to pay more taxes to bring a bunch of more kids in our schools, which are already overcrowded.
Thank you. So I can't answer questions about the larger, what else is happening in the municipality. I can tell you that the only way that you're going to begin to recoup revenue from this site is by creating new assets that are performing on this site. There may be things happening elsewhere in town that are recouping that lost revenue from this property, but this is what we need to do in order to do that. I think that part of our job will be to make sure, just like a balanced diet, proteins and carbs or whatever, you need to have different types of uses for different reasons. And that from a fiscal standpoint, we need to make sure that we're not just putting uses in there that are going to drain, that are going to be a net negative on your tax base, essentially. Let me do 2 more. Okay.
Thank you. First of all, great plan. I got a couple of related questions.
I think you did.
So the first question is, in Livingston, we don't have great restaurants with great liquor licenses. A lot of us go outside of Livingston.
Yeah.
If you want to go out for dinner, etc. So do you have any ideas about that? And secondly, how much would this plan cost? And if at the peak we got $5 million of revenues, are you targeting a level of revenues like we want minimum $10 million in revenues?
So we haven't modeled this from a fiscal perspective. That would be something that we would do. I think that this community would expect us to do, is ultimately to have a projection of that nature, not just that looks at revenues, but also looks at expenses. Because, as I was explaining to this gentleman, different types of land uses will generate their own different levels of cost, right? So I think that's something that will come and that we're going to back into. This was like the intense brainstorming period, right? So we needed to put some things down on paper, and now we're going to go back, put things into spreadsheets, and continue to develop that. To your other point about liquor licenses, which I think that's what the question was, there is a law. Is it passed, Ron? A law that has been passed by the state of New Jersey, maybe one of the good things they've done, where if you have a mall that is vacant or is vacating, that they issue you new liquor licenses to help with the redevelopment. Is it like 1 per 500 or? So you could potentially have 2 new liquor licenses here, and the way that sometimes these facilities would work is that you might have like 2 different restaurant formats that use the same liquor license. So we would try to maximize that. Right, as a state law, yeah. Maybe one more. I'm not gonna get to everybody. Mark, you could pick. A hard job.
I'm the maker here. Yeah, right.
Thank you. Hi, I've lived here since I'm 2 years old, and I'd like to be able to stay. I think the plan is really wonderful. Thank you for all your hard work. But for me, it was missing one thing. Affordable housing, great. How about affordable senior housing?
We could do that. We could do that.
Look around the room.
Yeah.
That's what I haven't heard anywhere.
Yeah.
In all the buildings that are going up, and I don't know if you know about how many apartment complexes
do.
there are, but I haven't heard about that, not once. I lived here all my life.
Yeah. That is certainly something that the councilman may have something to say about this. Yeah.
Whenever we have affordable housing obligations, we always max out the senior housing. It's the first thing. We're limited by how much senior housing we can have. We always max it out as soon as we can.
That's state law.
It's state law. It's state law, but.
I look at other communities and shore communities, and they build,
The Westminster.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is.
We have one, just so you should, we have one. I said beautiful. We have a beautiful one. We have a beautiful one that is just started now to be built on the western side, on the eastern side on the border of West Orange and Livingston, which is a Livingston property. Okay. 240 units or so. It's gonna be gorgeous, all 55. 80% of it is 55 and over.
But is it affordable?
And the Westminster, and the.
Affordable housing?
Both, affordable and senior. 20% is affordable and is senior, and there's also 140 units coming on Route 10, where the Westminster Hotel was. 140 units of those are 55 and over as well. So we do max out whatever the state can tell us to the maximum number, because we understand the reason why.
Right, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to have business cards here that if anybody wants to, have a conversation in the next week or so. Thank you again so much for coming out and being part of this. Thank you. Okay. Yeah.